thank you so much for having me. Just first of all, a huge thank you to Robertson and my granddaughter for having me, inviting me, and to the League Seminary, the young professionals, and especially to Esther. I know for Esther, I know that a lot goes on behind the scenes, so thank you. I want to thank our anonymous sponsor for sponsoring tonight's lecture and for sponsoring a book to give out. This is my newest book, which we'll be giving out, and we'll do a raffle or something interesting. And I really, last but not least, want to thank every single one of you for being here. It means a lot to me that you are here. And our class is dedicated, please Hashem, for the Hatzlacha and Shalom of Klal Yisrael. Okay, our topic tonight is called Finding Forgiveness. And we're going to be talking about how forgiveness truly, truly frees us. Okay, so ladies, let me ask you a question. I have here in my hands a cup of water. Okay, if you had to guesstimate, if you had to calculate, how much do you think it weighs? How heavy do you think it is? Anybody?
A few ounces.
A few ounces. Okay, so this professor in the university asked this very question to his students, and they started shouting out answers. 3 ounces, 5 ounces. He goes, you're all correct. They're like, what's with this guy? What is he talking about? How can we all be correct? It can't be 3 ounces and 5 ounces. He says, how heavy something feels just depends on how long you've been holding on to it for. And it's so true. The longer we hold on to painful experiences, the heavier and the more weighed down we feel. So I want to share with you an example of somebody who lightened their burden, who lightened their load through the power of forgiveness. True story. I had a student named Eliana Wolfalder, and she calls me up and she says, Sarah, I hate my neighbor. I'm like, oh boy, talk to me. We'll call her Sharon, okay? She goes, you don't understand. Me and Sharon, we were friends before she moved in next door. We got together, we liked each other. She moves in. I'm doing all the nice neighborly things. I'm buying her things from the market, I'm lending her things. What does she do? She borrows things, she brings them. She borrows things, she doesn't return them. That's not even the bad part, she says. She says she sees me on the street, she's been ignoring me. She has parties in her house, inviting all of my friends, doesn't include me. She goes, 2 people play this game. She's going to ignore me, I'm going to ignore her. And they got into this gridlock where they were literally on the sidewalk in front of their house, within 5 feet of each other, totally ignoring the other one's presence. So I could tell it was uncomfortable, it was not feeling very good for Eliana, it was tension-filled, and it was weighing her down. So we had been learning together, and I said to her, why don't you just send a repair text? Quick text, apologize, something. She goes, I have nothing to apologize for. And she was right. It took a ton of courage. It took a lot of humility. She reached out and she sent the following text. I want to read it to you. Can I read it to you? Okay. She goes, hey, I wanted to reach out and potentially speak with you. I've noticed some tension and I want to apologize if I've done something to offend you. I'm wondering if you've noticed and if we could somehow make things better. Click, she sends it, doesn't get a response back. And she said to me, she's like, okay, at least I did my part. A little while later, she responds, unreal response, you have to hear this. Hi, thanks so much for reaching out. I have meaning definitely, noticed tension as well. I'm not sure what went wrong, but I would love to put it behind us. Long story short, they got together, they talked it out, there had been some sort of misunderstanding. Today, they are friends as if nothing negative happened. Now that's beautiful, but that's not the point of the story. Whether or not they became friends is not the point. Here is the key. Eliana told me, she said, Sarah, as soon as I clicked send, I felt this weight lifted from me. I felt this burden lifted from me. That forgiveness freed her. Now here's the thing. This is where you're like, all right, Sarah Pachter, beautiful, lovely story of 2 people both doing their part in the forgiveness cycle. But what if I'm dealing with someone who's not so easy to deal with? What if I'm dealing with someone who's not doing their part in the forgiveness cycle? What if they're self-absorbed? What if they're dysfunctional, right? What if they pass away? How do you create forgiveness with someone? How do you find forgiveness when they're not around and doing their part? You hear the question? So Dr. Kelkovitz, who's the leading psychologist in the Jewish world today, says a beautiful and brilliant idea. I'm quoting him. He says, the Hebrew word for forgiveness, what is it? Mechila, mochal, right? Mem, chet, lamed is the root. The Hebrew word for a tunnel, and to burrow out a tunnel, is machol, also mem, chet, lamed. Now we know when two words have the same roots, they're going to be connected. So what could possibly be the connection between a tunnel and forgiveness? So just like when you're digging a tunnel, you've got to go deep, deep into the earth's surface to dig. When you are forgiving someone, you've got to go deep inside. You've got to humble yourself. You've got to dig deep in order to find forgiveness. But on a deeper level, what's a tunnel? Everybody thinks of Hamas tunnels now these days, but what is really a tunnel? By the way, my family was in Ir David on the east side of Jerusalem by Christian's tunnels the day before October 7th. And so what's a tunnel? A tunnel is an area that you normally don't have access to. It's an area that you normally can't get to. And this tunnel makes a passage straight towards what wasn't possible before. So a tunnel, in essence, is a connector. Because what's the ideal way to make a tunnel? You have two groups in two different cities. One group in one city starts digging. The other group in the other city, they're digging, and they meet in the middle. That's how those tunnels and Tizkiah's tunnels were created. So you have two people with two different perspectives. They come together, they dig, and they meet in the middle. That's the ideal way to bridge the gap, right? Here's the shocker of Judaism. Judaism does not believe that we have to forgive someone if they're not doing their part in the forgiveness cycle. But we're also not allowed to hold a grudge. So I believe that you can create that tunnel entirely on your own. You can create closure with a person that is not doing their part. And when you do all the digging and you do all the burrowing out, I believe Hashem turns that tunnel that you created into a pathway to go straight to wherever you want to go. I've seen it in my own life. The power of forgiveness brings so much bracha, it's a gift to you. So you can burrow out a tunnel. You can reach a new destination, one of light and one of connection. So that's element one. A tunnel is a connector. But on a deeper level, a tunnel is also an escape. What are we escaping from? So here's where I'm going to lead you on tonight's thing. I have this great quote. It's one of my favorite quotes of all time. You'll tell me if you've heard it. To forgive is to set a prisoner free, only to discover that that prisoner was you. You've ever heard of that before? It's by Louis B. Snyder. It's my favorite quote. To forgive is to set somebody free and then to recognize that you were the prisoner. So I'm going to ask you guys a question. I'm asking myself this question too, okay? Imagine you're walking through the streets. It's a beautiful day. Sun is shining. Birds are chirping. Maybe you're a little bit doing some self-care, getting a manicure, taking a walk. Everything's fine. And what happens? Your mind takes you to a really painful memory. Has that ever happened to you? Yes, okay? Why do we do this to ourselves? What happens to our body? Our body follows, right? Our eyes might start to well up. Our chest tightens up. We might get an uncomfortable feeling in our throat. Everything's fine. Nothing has changed about our environment, but our body is now acting totally different. Why do we do this to ourselves? So I think on one level, we think that if we nourish these thoughts, right, and we long for validation, we will rehash those thoughts in our minds, either with a friend or even just thinking about the thought ourselves, and we think it's going to find comfort and bring us comfort. But it doesn't bring us comfort. It destroys our health. It does terrible things to us, but we rehash with a friend longing for that validation. And on a deeper level, why do we do? Because I think deep down, we worry that if we just let go and just release that person, then we're literally going to just let them off the hook. We're going to just let them get away with it, and we don't want to let them get away with it. So almost as a way to punish the other person and keep them in a negative place, We stay there. But who do we end up punching? Ourselves. We know the quote, resentment is like taking a poison and hoping the other person dies. Okay, so here's the key line of the whole night. Everything's going to build from here. Stay with me here, okay? Nourishing these thoughts, staying there in our mind, is like returning to a prison that we've already been free from. So you guys heard of Dr. Eve Eger. She's a famous psychologist, amazing woman. She survived Auschwitz, and she's an international best-selling author. I had the privilege and honor of interviewing her in her home in San Diego for an H podcast called Starstruck that I'm going to post up. So I'm sitting in her San Diego home, beautiful living room. We're on our white leather couches, and the whole back wall is glass. And we're overlooking the San Diego shore. If you saw her house today, you would never know that she was tortured in Auschwitz. And she's helped thousands of people overcome victimhood. So we're sitting there talking, and she says something mind-blowing. Listen to this. She said to me, Sarah, the day that we were liberated from Auschwitz, the day that we were free, every single person that had the physical ability to get up, because a lot of Jews could not even get up, she said if we could physically get up and walk, everybody walked up, stood up, and walked out that iron gate. We walked out of Auschwitz. She said a surprising number of people, a huge percentage of people, walked right back in. And they slept in the same barracks that they had the night before. Can you imagine? They were free. They could leave. They could go anywhere. And they chose to go right back into Auschwitz and sleep in the same barracks. I guess understandably because they didn't feel like they had anywhere to go. Now, I don't want to compare the two, but I'm going to do this for a second. You ever see the movie Shawshank Redemption? Anybody seen it at all? Okay, so what is it about? Tell me what it's about. Good. Okay, so it's a guy, he's convicted of murder, but he's actually innocent. Did not commit the crime, and he gets life imprisonment. He is stuck in jail forever, and he is a totally innocent man. So what does he do? Little by little, day by day, he digs out a tunnel, and he escapes. He's the main character of the movie, but there's a whole lot of other characters. And one of them was actually a convict, commits a crime. The movie shows him being freed. He's so happy the day he's finally let out. And then the movie skips, and he's right back in jail. And his inmate looks at him and says, how'd you end up back in here? He goes, well, I committed a petty crime just so I could come back. And this is a phenomenon that actually happens in real life. Criminals will commit a crime just to get back into jail. Isn't that crazy? Why would somebody do that? When you look at an objective level, it doesn't make sense to go back into Auschwitz. It doesn't make sense to want to go back to jail. On an objective level, it makes no sense. And yet every single one of us does this on an emotional level. We commit psychological slavery. We impose it upon ourselves. Everything's fine. The day is sunny. Everything's great. And our mind drags us back to that memory. And sometimes it's because we don't feel like we have anywhere positive to go. But for a lot of us, have you ever been on a Delta flight where you see like the Flight Connector magazine? I'm such a nerd, but I'm going to do this. Such a nerd. Okay, do you guys know what I'm talking about? So I'm from Atlanta, which is a very big airport. I think we have the largest airport in the world. And so there's a ton of connecting flights to Atlanta. And there's a ton of connecting flights here in LA, and there's a ton in New York, right? But there's not a lot of connecting flights between Montana and Alabama. Are you with me? That's actually how our brain works. We have certain emotionally charged memories that get a lot of attention, that get a lot of connecting flights, okay? And so for a lot of us, what happens is our brain uses those cues, and that cue will take us back to that memory. So I'm going to give you a quick example. Let's say you're in a Starbucks and you're having coffee with a friend. Something goes sour, and you guys end your friendship. The next 3 times that you drive by Starbucks, what do you think about? The breakup with your friend, right? The place serves as a cue to that memory. Here's the thing. A place could serve as a cue. An object could serve as a cue. And here's the kicker. A thought can serve as a cue to a negative thought, to another negative thought, to another negative thought, and leading you down a rabbit hole. So tonight, I want to drag you out of that rabbit hole. I want you to break free once and for all, because every one of us has the capacity to fully free ourselves. You hold the key to find that forgiveness, and that's what I want to offer you tonight. Okay, quick caveat. I have to say this. I want to make sure everyone understands that I'm totally not saying this, okay? Or I guess I am saying this. It's really important not to suppress your emotions. I'm not saying to suppress them or ignore them. Then they're going to erupt at random times that have nothing to do with anything. So I'll give you a funny story. My kids love to play this with me in the pool. We're in the pool, and they'll throw me a ball. They'll say, Mommy, keep it below the water surface. So I'm like, okay, I sit on it, right? It's pretty easy. I'm sitting on the ball, I'm keeping it under the water. Then they throw me a second ball. They're like, Mommy, keep them both under the water. So I'm like, all right, put one under one leg, one under the other, and I'm keeping it under the surface. But then they throw me a third and a fourth ball. I'm using all of my might, every limb of my body, just to keep it down. Well, when you have 3, 4 balls, they start flying. You can't keep it down. If you try to suppress your emotions, if you try to stuff it down, keep it below the surface, everything's fine, just stuff it down, they're going to fly out at random places that you don't want it to fly out in. So sometimes it's important to visit jail, so to speak, work through the emotions so you can release it, but there is a very big difference between visiting jail and parking yourself in jail, okay? So let's go back to Dr. Edith Eger for a second and understand how this woman found forgiveness. You have to understand, anybody knows anything about her life? She was a famous dancer. She was chosen, she was also a gymnast, and she was chosen by her coach to be in the Olympics. She was training hours a day before Hitler came to power and stole that dream from her. And so she spends her formative teenage years in Auschwitz. She is forced, excuse my crassness, but I'm going to say it, she is forced to dance in the nude for Mengele to save her life. Can you imagine the brutality? How do you forgive Mengele? How do you move on from Hitler? How do you move on from Auschwitz? So she did. She was able to do it, but she confided in me that she had 2 blocks that for years she couldn't move past. So I want to share those blocks because I think maybe we'll see them within ourselves. Okay, first block. Day 1 of Auschwitz. She arrived, she's with her mom and her 2 sisters, 4 ladies in line, and Mengele is pointing people to the left and right. Nobody has any clue what's flying. You have to understand, these 4 women, when they used to walk the streets before the war broke out, people thought they were sisters. Her mother had a beautiful face, gorgeous visage, very, very young. And so they're in line, and Mengele points her mother to the right, to life. And Dr. Edith Eger, who was very young, she's the youngest sibling, instinctively, that separation from her mom, even momentarily, she goes, Mama! And Mengele looks at her and says, this is your mother? Shoves her to the left, pushes her into the gas chambers, and she dies on the first day of Auschwitz. Edith Eger looked at me with tears in her eyes, and she said, Sarah, I could forgive Hitler. I could forgive Mengele. I could not forgive myself. She was holding on to that burden the entire time as she was trying to survive. So how did she overcome that first block? She meets with Dr. Viktor Frankl. You've heard of Dr. Viktor Frankl. He's literally the #1 best-selling author besides the Bible, okay? And he called her Edie. He said, he became her mentor. He's also a psychologist and a survivor of Auschwitz. He said, Edie, the only freedom that you have is up here. Even if you're a free man, we don't have freedom. It's all in your mind. That's the only freedom you have. Think about it. We don't have financial freedom. Even if you're very, very wealthy, anything can happen at any point, and nobody has unlimited funds. We don't have freedom over our bodies. We don't know where our body's going to be at a specific time. You could be stuck in traffic. A person could get sick, chas v'shalom, right? We don't know what's going to be. You could be stuck in a city because you have a job or because of schooling. Okay? The only freedom that you always have control over is in your mind. So going back to that example of traffic, just for simplicity. Let's say you're sitting in traffic. You could be raging, or you could call a lonely friend, or you could listen to a Torah Anytime tape, right? Or video, or whatever it is. Like, your mind can be somewhere else. You could be living in a city where there is little to no Judaism, and you can create your Judaism. That's what they did in Auschwitz. They weren't allowed to keep mitzvahs, and they kept them anyways. Or you could be living in one of the most lavish zip codes in America, and you could be jailed by your thoughts of depression and anxiety and frustration and resentment. So freedom, forgiveness is a gift that Hashem gives us in our mind. Okay, we just started Elul, which is a time of connection and forgiveness. Let me ask you a question. Who forgives us on Yom Kippur? Hashem, okay. Who else? Maybe each other. Or maybe there's somebody else in the equation. Okay, there's a beautiful, beautiful concept. What do we say 100 times on Yom Kippur in the Machzor? Hashem, Hashem, Kel Rachum, V'chana. We say the 13 principles of peace. And then it says, Chata v'nakeh. We sin, and God forgives. And that's where we end our beautiful little song in shul, but that's not where the pasuk ends. The pasuk continues, we just stop. The pasuk says, V'lo yenakeh. We will not be cleansed. So which one is it? God, do you cleanse us or do you not cleanse us? God, do you forgive us or do you not forgive us? I heard a beautiful idea by Rabbi Shul Lindenberg, my husband's grandfather. He says, Hashem forgives us, but he doesn't fully forgive us because we have work to do. We have inner work. We have to learn to forgive ourselves, and we have to learn to forgive each other. So it's not all on God. We have to forgive ourselves, and this was Dr. Edith Eger's first block. She could not forgive herself. Her second block was even more powerful and more relatable. We're sitting on her couches, and she looks at me and she says, Sarah, I felt like the biggest hypocrite. I'm like, how did you feel like a hypocrite? She said, there it was, helping thousands of people overcome feelings of victimhood, and I could not get over my feelings of victimhood. Literally, she said, I refused to go back to Auschwitz. She would accept speaking engagements at the White House, with Oprah, all over the place, wouldn't set foot in Auschwitz. And so she said, the time came where I decided, I'm going back. And she goes with her husband and her sister, and she leads the trip, and she's standing in the exact spot where she was tortured as a child, and she's shaken and she's frozen. And she looks up and she sees her husband just outside the iron gate, literally standing out there. And she gathers the strength and she starts marching towards him. And she says, I stood up. I leave Auschwitz. I skip out. I pass under those words, Arbeit macht frei, work sets you free. How cruel and mocking those words were. But as I pass under them, I realize there's glimmers of truth to those words. Work does set you free. Not the work the Nazis were talking about, but inner work of learning to survive and thrive and learning to forgive. And when I do that kind of work, then I am no longer hostage or prisoner over anyone or anything. That's the moment I became free. So let's follow in her footsteps. Let's learn what her technique was and apply it to ourselves. What was her technique? She has one technique that I'm going to divide into 3 parts. Visualize, release, and rage. Here are my disclaimers, okay? I'm not a psychologist. I'm not claiming to be. I'm just giving you the tool that she shared with me, and I read it in her book. I've used it myself. It's phenomenal. And I've shared it with students. I'm telling you, this is the technique I've gotten the most feedback of any other tool I've given anyone. So this is it. Here's my second disclaimer, and this is where you guys get to choose. Sort of like an open-ended audience decides type of thing. Basically, I have this story that's very, very intense. It's very shocking. So I can give it to you the real way, or we can hear a neutralized version. What do you guys want? We're going real. Let's do it. Okay. It's a true story. I actually have an article about this young woman. You can read it on Aish. We'll use the name Cindy. That's not her name. Lovely, lovely woman. She's married. She has a child. She does not live in LA. Very, very happy person and very positive person. You would never know from looking at her that she had a very tumultuous childhood. Her father was abusive, not only physically, but emotionally to her and her mother. And she doesn't really have all that many memories because her dad and her mom divorced when she was young, but she has little glimmers, and I'm going to share them with you. And I have to tell you, it was hard for me to even hear this as her mentor and as her teacher, but I do have permission to share with you. Memory number one, it's hard for me to say it. When her mom was expecting her younger sister, she was about 8 or 9 months pregnant, she watched her father lift her mother up by the throat, choking her in the air, feet dangling. She literally almost watched her mom pass away at her father's hands. Can you imagine? Another example, it's Friday afternoon, her mom is cooking Shabbat, smells are wafting through the house. She to this day has no idea what happened. Her father walks into the room, goes into a rage, throws the food at them, burning their skin, throwing all the food into the garbage eventually. She says she remembers they didn't have time to cook anything else. They did not have food for that Shabbat. Obviously, she went to therapy. Obviously, she did a lot of work, but there was one memory that she could not shake from her current day, and this is what it was. She was sitting, playing a game of dominoes with her dad. This is the only time she ever remembers him gracing her with his presence like this. Sitting by the dining room table, dominoes are all set up, and her elbows kind of resting on the table. One domino fell to the floor. Her elbow slipped, and a domino fell to the floor. Her father stood up in a rage, shoves her against the wall, screamed at her, "You idiot!" Profanity's going crazy. I get the chills when I hear this, when I say it. She literally said to me, "Sarah, when my father treated me that way, I felt so deflated." That's the word she used. I felt like a nothing. And I looked into his eyes, and I saw his anger, and I felt so scared. So I gave her the technique. This was the tool. This was the memory she could not shake. I shared with her Dr. Edith Eger's tool, and she came back to me and told me how effective it was. Listen to this. Step one is visualize. I said, go back into the scene. Look at the dominoes on the table, be in the dining room, see the artwork on the wall, create a vivid imagery so that it feels like it's real to you, and watch your father start his rage, and then freeze the scene. And you go back into the room as the adult that you are today. And you go over to your younger self, and you hold her, and you hug her, and you literally comfort her until she's comforted. And then you take her by the hand and you say, "Come, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to keep you safe. I'm going to protect you. You don't live here anymore. Come with me." And you take her hand, and you walk out the door, and you confidently walk away. You walk down the driveway, down the street, you walk away. And then you bring her into your current day life. Look, bring her into your apartment. Look at your beautiful husband. Look at your beautiful child. This is where you live now. You don't live there anymore. You don't have to live there anymore. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to keep you safe, and I am going to love you. And so that's the step one. You visualize, you comfort your younger self, and you show her how amazing it is to stay in the present moment. Okay? Step one. But you're not done. Step two. You got to go back into the scene where your father is raging. He's frozen in that rage. And now it's time to release. Step two. So you go over to your father, you put your hand on his shoulder, and you look him in the eyes, and you say, "No, you can't do this anymore. Once I was young, once I was weak, but you have no power over me anymore. It's over." And you release the perpetrator. "I forgive you." Because Dr. Edith Eger says if you want to release yourself from feeling like a victim, you also have to release the perpetrator from the role that you have assigned them. And Cindy came back to me and she said this was unbelievably helpful, but there's a third tip, and this is what it is. This is what Dr. Edith Eger emphasizes, and it's what the Torah emphasizes as well. She says there is no release without step three, and that's rage. She says you have to sit in the pain. You have to experience the feeling of anger without judgment. Okay? She literally tells clients, I was laughing when she told me this, she says, I literally tell clients, come into my office, let out a primal scream, just scream it out. And if you don't want to do it, fine. Go get in your car, take a drive somewhere far, let the scream out. You don't want to do that? Go into your room and punch a pillow. You don't feel like that? Dance, move, exercise. You have to release and give that outlet to the rage without judgment. And this is actually a Kabbalistic idea. Rabbi Zion says, and I'm quoting, "You can't forgive unless you acknowledge the pain. Sit with it," right? Because only from the bottom can you spring forward from the top. And if you don't release the rage, it doesn't let you get to the place, that elevated place that it's supposed to. Okay, pause. At this point, you're like, okay, Sarah, hopefully nobody in this room is dealing with abuse. Hopefully nobody in this room is dealing with this type of trauma. Why are you telling us this example? Because if this technique can work with abuse, and if it can work for Auschwitz, how much more so Kal Vachomer can it work for the smaller irritants in our lives and the smaller challenges? I've used this technique myself. I had a student, her mother-in-law was just literally coming down on her. Every time she went to her mother-in-law's apartment, the mother-in-law would berate her. Her sisters would come in, the daughters of the mother-in-law would come in and also berate her sister-in-laws. She felt like a nothing. I said, use the technique. It doesn't have to be something from 20 years ago. It could be 2 weeks ago. Go into the scene, extricate yourself, set the boundary, love yourself, and watch yourself release all that anger. It's amazing. It's effective. I've used it. People have come back to me. You just need about 10 minutes of visualizing on your own. Okay? It's very, very effective. Now, in order for this to work well, you have to have certain elements in place, right? You need foundational elements. We're going to talk about 3 pieces, and then we're going to close. You have to understand the first piece is that the villain in your life actually propels you. The challenging person in your life, wild as it seems, is your greatest asset and accomplice in becoming your best self. Think about it. We all have drama in our lives, right? We all have almost like a play. And there are good guys and there are bad guys. And you have to embrace them all, because without the villain, there is no plot. And without the villain, there is no hero. And you have to be the hero of your story. So can I tell you an unbelievable example to illustrate this? Anybody here ever read the book Frindle? It's a famous book, okay, based on a true story. All the kids in my house I've read this to them at some point. I love this book. Just to recap, it's about a guy named Nick Allen. He's in 4th or 5th grade. 4th grade. 4th grade, thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, are you a teacher? Yeah. Love it, so you're going to love this. And he loves to be a troublemaker, and he has this kooky teacher that is obsessed with a dictionary. Her name is Mrs. Granger, am I right? Okay, good. So she's obsessed with the dictionary, and she's always telling them, okay, guys, you got to know where words come from, and sometimes somebody can make up a word, and that word ends up in the dictionary. So Nick's eyes light up because he's a troublemaker. He goes, anyone can make up a word? She goes, no, Nicholas, not people like you and I, right? It happens randomly. He goes, no, I'm going to make a word up. She goes, no, you're not going to make a word up. You're in 5th grade? 4th grade, you're in 4th grade, okay? He goes, watch me. And on the spot, he decides that a pen will now be called Frindle. He gets all the kids in his class to stop using that word. And she is livid, this teacher. She's like, you guys are disrespecting the dictionary. Anyone who uses Frindle gets a detention. So the whole class goes into detention. This kid gets the entire school to do it. So now the whole school, you have 300-400 kids in detention. Parents are livid. I can only imagine if this happened in my kid's school, I would be so upset, right? News reporters came in. They start filming like crazy. They're on to the story. And Mrs. Granger calls Nick into her office. She says, Nicholas, I don't know what you're doing. You're causing this ruckus. You better stop or I'm going to up the ante. And you see this envelope right here? I'm going to give this to you if you don't stop, and you are not going to be a happy camper. So what does he do? He ups the ante, and he goes full-out war. Long story short, teacher is long gone. Nick becomes a millionaire. Yes, he does. How? Because all these t-shirt companies and pen companies want to sign him up. He's sitting pretty in a penthouse, 21 years old. And he gets a package in the mail. He didn't order anything. Opens it up. It's this big package. It's a dictionary. And there's a little sticky note that says, hey, check out page 283. Opens up. Frindle is circled. Frindle is actually a word in the dictionary today, in the Collins Dictionary. In 1996, it became a word. Frindle is circled. And another sticky note says, hey, look at the envelope that you never opened. It's Mrs. Granger sent a dictionary, and she opens up the same envelope from 4th grade, and it reads, Dear Nicholas, I believe that one day your words didn't make it to the dictionary. But in order for it to get there, we need an enemy. So I am choosing to be the villain because in every story there has to be one. So I'm going to help propel you. If you are reading this letter, it means Frindle became a word. Congratulations, I am so proud of you. That villain was his biggest accomplice in achieving his goals. I made up a quote. You want to hear the Sarah Pachter quote? The villains in our lives, the difficult people in our lives, they either bring us or they break us. They either bring us where we're supposed to go or they break us in the process. And that is the choice that is ours. So again, the villain in your life can propel you. That's step one. Let's look at step two. Okay, this is like the second foundation. You cannot believe the lie that the perpetrator is saying. We know that Nazi Germany was all propaganda. It was all one lie. So I'm going to get a volunteer. Anybody raise your hand? I'm seeing like a hair shuffle. So I'm going to go with you. Okay, what's your name? Eliza. Okay, so Eliza, imagine, it's actually very good because you're wearing blue, so we'll use this as an example. Imagine I came to you and said, Eliza, you're a big purple elephant with blue ears. How would you respond? No. Right, you'd be like, oh, okay. Would you be offended? No, right? Why? Because you know with confidence that you are not an elephant. You don't have big blue purple ears, whatever I just said. It's so far from reality. Just like you know with certainty that you have 5 fingers on your hand, you know that you're not this elephant. When somebody says something and it hurts, it's because somewhere deep inside we believe them. And we wonder if maybe what they're saying has a little glimmer of truth. We cannot believe the lie that someone's saying. So along the same line, let's pretend I have a $100 bill that I'm flashing around, okay? 100, boom. And in through that door over there comes a guy, John Doe, and he says, that's a $5 bill. I'd be like, actually, John Doe, this is 100, right? Read it and leap right here. And imagine he starts screaming, jumping up and down, throwing his hat. That's a $5 bill. He's going crazy. It makes no difference what John Doe says. The value of the bill is non-negotiable, right? Maybe inflation makes it negotiable, but certainly not what John Doe says, right? Are you with me? Our self-esteem has to remain intact because it's non-negotiable. We are a piece of Hashem inside, and that is non-negotiable, no matter what anybody says. So when somebody shoves a lie at you and sends verbal arrows, we need to create this impenetrable surface that it cannot penetrate. So to give you a quick visual, if I can do this, by my son's bar mitzvah, he came out, now he's like almost 18, but at the time, he came out to the second dance inside of this bouncy ball, right? It was like this massive ball inside of it. And the boys were like throwing him against the wall and throwing it to the ceiling. And he didn't get hurt because he had this surrounding of this impenetrable bubble. And that's what we want to create with our lives. We want to, don't let that verbal arrow that just bounce off. It's a lie that we don't believe. Last step, okay, last piece. We have to remember and we have to believe that something good can come from the pain. It's possible for something good to come from the pain. I'm about to say something, and you guys are going to want to kick me out of here, okay? I'm going to lose all credibility with all of you, and I don't care. I'm going to say it anyways. Did you know there is no Hebrew word for why? Now you're going to be like, I'm sorry, Sarah, go back to Hebrew school. Okay, there is. It's called lama. You with me? You're Israeli, right? Actually, lama is a conjunction, and it's 2 words. Le-ma. For what? Because Jews don't ask why. Jews ask what. For what was this shown to me? What is the lesson that I can gain from this? So I'll tell you, I'm a Kolele teacher, which means I teach brides. And I've been doing this now for 16 years. And I've taught people in London, believe it or not, Texas, obviously California, New York, all over the US. I've heard thousands of drama stories of mother-in-law, daughter-in-law. I could literally write a book called No More Drama with Mama-in-Law. Yes. But selfishly, I'm so grateful for these stories. Why? Because I'm learning how to be a better daughter-in-law from these stories. Because I've had mother-in-laws call me. I'm learning how to be a better future mother-in-law from these stories. Every story that is presented to you, whether it's your story or someone else's story, is here to teach a lesson. What is the lesson? So can I make myself vulnerable with you? You guys want vulnerability, or should we skip on the vulnerability? We want vulnerability. Okay, let's do it. So I'll tell you a story that I learned something for myself as a young kid. I was about, 11, 12 years old. I'm from Atlanta. Anybody here from the South? Probably not. We have a bunch of LAers. Anybody Southern? No? We'll be fine. So I'm from Atlanta, and I was a pretty social kid. Never had issues socially, and one year I decided to go to the East Coast for summer camp. I'm not going to say the name of the camp, but whoa, did I learn fast what it meant to be on the other side of the popularity line, okay? I was excluded. I was somewhat ostracized. I remember going up to a group of girls and I was like, oh, like very naively, like, can I join your game or your dance or whatever? And they're like, we don't really need anyone. All the terrible things that preteen girls do to each other. And it was painful. It was really painful. So I had a choice. When I flew back to Atlanta, I could just glide right back into my little social standing and enjoy my popularity, or I made it my mission that if I saw a girl sitting alone, I would call her over and sit with us. If someone was trying to insert themselves into the conversation, I would help them. I didn't care if it made me a nerd. I didn't care if I dropped 100 rungs on the social ladder. Didn't make a difference. I did not want anyone to experience what I had experienced. Even to the point, my parents moved from Atlanta to Florida during COVID. They sent me my yearbooks, and one entry, a girl writes, "Thank you for always being the nice one, even when everybody else wasn't." And that's powerful. I drill it into my kids' heads. Being the nice one, invite the new girl, invite. So when my son's teacher, he was in 4th grade, when my son's teacher calls me, he goes, I don't know if you know what your son did, but you have to know what happened. I was like, oh boy. This boy was not playing with anyone on the playground. He was reading science fiction. He didn't have any friends. And my son went over to him and started talking to him about his book, his science fiction book. The next day, he created a game where each kid in the class would be a character of the book, and they started playing with this kid. This kid never had a problem on the playground again. So because of something that happened to me 25 years ago, something painful that happened to me 25 years ago, now there's a kid who didn't have a problem on the playground. You understand? Something good can come from the pain. My surprise. That's not why I told you the story. You want to know the real reason why I told you the story? Here's the real reason I told you my terrible 12-year-old camp story. Here we go. I'm 12, they're mean to me. Fast forward, I'm 17, and I'm playing basketball for my high school team, and we head down to Miami, Florida, for this nationwide tournament where we're playing in front of other Jewish kids. And we are playing for the championship game. Do you understand? Number 1 placement. And we're playing an East Coast team, and I look up, and who is it? It's that girl that was mean to me in camp. I'm telling you, I went from being a 17-year-old confident basketball player, I just shriveled up into a 12-year-old. I went right back to camp. My brain took me right back to camp. I even go over to my coach, and I'm like, Coach, we want to win tonight, right? She goes, yeah. I'm like, don't play me. Don't play me. I'm not in that headspace. That girl over there was mean to me when I was 12. She's like, are you crazy? Get in the game. And she shoves me on the court. I don't have any choice where my body is, but now I have an internal choice in my mind. I could be a prisoner to those girls in that camp my whole life, or I could choose to set myself free and celebrate the victory. Not the victory over the other team or the other person, but the victory over myself. And this is what forgiveness does. It frees you to become your best self. So now, bonus, pause, 1 second. Somebody asked me a question that was so brilliant and so awesome and so relatable, and I think the answer ties everything together. So can we do this question real quick? Okay. She comes to me and she says, Sarah, what if I don't feel like being the good one? I'm always so nice. I'm always in the bad there. This person is acting like an animal. I'm tired of it. Enough is enough. They're so rude. I'm tired. Can we hear the question? Okay. We have to have a paradigm shift. As I mentioned before, it's not you versus the other person. It's really you versus yourself. Because every challenging person in your life is literally a pawn on the chessboard. And the only thing that you have control over is your next move. So let's imagine for a second, here's where we tie it together. Let's imagine somebody's rude, they're obnoxious, they say something rude, and you have every right to respond, and you don't. What happens? Apparently, we merit a hidden light called the Or Haganuz, reserved at the time of creation that Hashem created the world, only for tzaddikim. This is not mysticism, guys. This is not Kabbalah. This is Rashi, chapter 1, line 4. This is mainstream Judaism. We merit a hidden light. Maybe, just maybe, that's the light that when you dig out that tunnel all on your own, and you create the closure, and you create the forgiveness, and you find that light at the end of the tunnel, maybe that's the Or HaGanuz that they're talking about. So I want to give you a visual because we can't be what we can't see. Anybody here heard of the Machlis family? Okay, so what do they do every Shabbos? Leila.
They open up their home to whoever wants them and
Good, they open up their homes to literally the entire world can come. You have homeless people there, you have philanthropists, you have yeshiva boys, seminary girls, everything. It's like so packed, but everyone's comfortable, it's beautiful. One Friday night, a guy brings, legit, a donkey. An actual donkey to, this is so Machlis, right? If you've been there, right? I've been there, it's so Machlis. The guy brings the donkey, the guests are upset, it smells bad, they're scared. So Rabbi Machlis goes over to the man with the donkey, and he says, you know, some of the guests are a little afraid. Do you mind if I go outside with it? I'll stay with the donkey. I'll take the donkey outside. You stay, you eat. I'll wait outside with them. Is it okay? The guy, this deranged, starts screaming at Rabbi Machlis. You call yourself a rabbi? You're a farce. I get on my... Screaming. How did Rabbi Machlis respond? He looks down. He says, you know, you're right. I could have said it a little nicer. Unbelievable. He had every right to respond, and he did it. That's what I call a Machlis moment. So if that happens in my home, where if one of my kids is nice to the other, I say, wow, that's a Machlis moment. Or if they have one piece of gum left in their little container, and they give it to their sibling, I say, wow, that's a Machlis moment. So we had a big time Machlis moment in the behind-the-scenes Pachter family. This is where I'm going to end. This is an unbelievable story. I was pregnant with my fourth child, and you probably know, Sharona, that when I'm pregnant, I'm very, very sick. Like, till the day you remember, oh my gosh, like really, really bad nausea, everything. We're in Israel, and we're at a hotel for Pesach, and it's before the Seder night, and I am like literally falling on my face from nausea. And so I decided to go into the dining room a little early with my little kids. I was going to feed them, eat something myself. I was very sick. And there's nobody in the dining room, like nobody. There's a bunch of waiters walking around, it's beautifully set up, but there's one guy sitting at a rented table. I watched the waiters go over to this guy and they're like, sir, I'm sorry, but you can't sit here. This is for a reserved family who paid to be here. He goes, I paid to be here. I'm sitting right here, I'm not moving, this is my table. They say, no, sir, you're not understanding. Someone paid for their family. You could sit somewhere else. We also don't want you to sit alone, but you can sit here. He goes, I'm not moving. This is where I'm sitting. I don't want to sit alone. I am not moving from this spot. I am sitting right here. And to get into this whole thing, my son was 10 years old at the time. He looked at me and he goes, Mommy, he doesn't want to sit alone. Can we invite him to our table at our Seder so we can have Seder with that? And my heart like melted, nausea and everything. And I wish that I could say I was a tzaddikas, but I am embarrassed to admit this is part of the Rebbitzin, but I will anyways. I curled into a mattress ball. I didn't even get to hear Seder that night. I was so sick. But my husband and my son and our daughter and my husband's aunt sat together and invited this man to have the entire Seder with them. And my husband said, and I quote, it was the most unusual, but the most beautiful Seder he had ever had. Now there's two ways to look at this. You could say, this guy ruined our Seder. He was so awkward and he said so many weird comments and we paid for this. This was a lot of money. Or, I guarantee you that after 120 years, and I get tears in my eyes when I think about this, when I am begging to be allowed into Shemayim, I'm going to be so grateful for this moment that we had this opportunity to treat someone this way. And this is really a microcosm. All the difficult people, the awkward people, the strange, the deranged people in our lives, they are gifts that bring us where we're supposed to go. They either bring us or they break us. The choice is ours, and so let's choose forgiveness. Thank you.